in the heart of Makoko village, where the baobab trees whispered ancient secrets and the red earth held memories of countless generations, there lived a girl whose fate would shock everyone who thought they knew the limits of human cruelty. Amina was 16, with eyes that sparkled like morning dew despite the hardships that had befallen her since her father's death 2 years ago. The villagers often remarked on her gentle nature, how she helped the elderly carry water from the well, how she sang to calm crying bobbies at the market, how she shared her meager portions with hungry children. But at home, behind the mud walls of her family compound, Amina lived a different life entirely. Her stepmother, Mama Kessie, had arrived like a storm cloud 3 years ago, charming Amina's father with honeyed words and practiced smiles. After his sudden illness and death, the mask had slipped away, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Where once Amina had been cherished as the jewel of her father's eye, she now scrubbed floors until her knees bled and fetched water until her back ached like an old woman's. "Useless girl," Mama Kessie would hiss, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You eat my food and live under my roof, yet you move like a lazy tortoise." But Amina endured it all with quiet dignity, holding on to her father's last words. "Be patient, my daughter. Truth always finds its way to light, like water finding its path to the river." Strange things had begun happening in their compound. Neighbors whispered about odd sounds at night, chanting that didn't match any prayers they knew, smoke that smelled of bitter herbs and something else, something that made the dogs whimper and hide. Mama Kessie's own children, 2 boys who had once played with Amina, now looked at her with fear in their eyes, forbidden to speak to her beyond necessity. One humid night, when the moon hid behind thick clouds and even the crickets seemed to hold their breath, Amina lay on her thin mat, unable to sleep. Through the cracked wall, she heard Mama Kessie moving about in the main house, speaking in a low, urgent voice. Curiosity overcame caution, and Amina crept closer, pressing her ear against the mud wall. What she heard made her blood turn to ice water in her veins. "Yes, I have prepared everything," Mama Kessie was saying. "The girl suspects nothing. Tomorrow night, when the moon is darkest, I will complete what I started with her father. Then all his wealth, all his land will truly be mine. The ancestors cannot protect her from what I have planned." Amina's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. Her father, had he not died of illness after all? And now Mama Kessie planned something terrible for her too. She had to tell someone, had to warn the village elders. But who would believe a young girl over a respected widow? As she turned to creep back to her mat, her foot struck a clay pot, sending it rolling across the floor with a sound like thunder in the quiet night. The voices in the main house stopped abruptly. Then came footsteps, slow and deliberate, heading toward her room. The door creaked open, and Mama Kessie's silhouette filled the doorway like a dark omen. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light in the darkness, and Amina felt her throat close with fear. "So the little mouse has been listening where she shouldn't," Mama Kessie said, her voice eerily calm. "I wondered when you would discover the truth about your precious father. He thought he was so clever, refusing to sign over his properties to me. But there are older ways, darker ways, to get what one desires." Amina scrambled backward, her voice finally breaking free. You killed him, you poisoned my father." "Poison?" Mama Kessie laughed, a sound like hyenas in the night. "Oh, my dear child, poison is for amateurs. I used something far more elegant, a curse that ate him from the inside, slow and untraceable. The same fate awaited you, but now." She pulled out a small gourd from her wrapper, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to writhe in the moonlight. "Now I must use quicker methods." Amina tried to run, but her legs felt heavy as stones. The air in the room grew thick, pressing against her like wet cloth. Mama Kessie began to chant in a language that predated memory, words that made the very walls tremble. "Help!" Amina cried out, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Someone, please help me." But the night swallowed her pleas. Mama Kessie's chanting grew louder, and the gourd in her hands began to glow with a sickly green light. She threw a powder that sparkled like crushed stars, and it settled over Amina like a suffocating blanket. "You want to cry out like an animal? Then an animal you shall become," Mama Kessie snarled. "Let's see who will listen to a sheep's bleating." The transformation was agony. Amina felt her bones crack and reshape, her skin crawl and sprout coarse wool. Her fingers fused together into hooves, her face elongated, and her desperate screams became the terrified bleating of a sheep. Within moments, where a frightened girl had cowered, now stood a white sheep with unusually bright eyes, eyes that still held human intelligence and terror. Mama Kessie grabbed a rope and tied it around the sheep's neck. Tomorrow, I'll tell everyone that ungrateful Amina ran away in the night, probably eloped with some boy. And look, I'll say, she left behind this sheep as payment for all my kindness. Who would ever suspect? She dragged the transformed Amina to the small pen behind the house where the other animals were kept. The goats and chickens scattered in fear, sensing something unnatural about this new addition to their number. As the first light of dawn painted the sky purple and gold, Amina tried desperately to speak, to scream, to make someone understand. But all that came from her throat were the plaintive bleats of a sheep. Tears, human tears, rolled down her woolly face as she realized the full horror of her situation. The village was beginning to wake. Soon, people would ask about her, and Mama Kessie would spin her web of lies, while Amina remained trapped in this animal form, unable to tell anyone the truth about the monster living among them. Days blurred into weeks, and Amina's new existence became a waking nightmare. Each morning, Mama Kessie would come to the pen with a cruel smile, checking that her spell held firm. "Still crying, are we?" she would mock, seeing the wet trails on the sheep's face. "Animals don't cry, stupid beast. You'd better learn to act like a proper sheep or people might get suspicious." The village believed Mama Kessie's story completely. Poor woman, they said, abandoned by her ungrateful stepdaughter after all she'd done for her. Some whispered that Amina had always been wild, that it was only a matter of time before she brought shame to the family. Others shook their heads sadly, remembering the sweet girl who had helped them carry their loads. Amina's best friend, Fatu, was the only one who seemed troubled by her disappearance. She came to the house several times, asking questions that made Mama Kessie's eyes narrow dangerously. "But Auntie, Amina would never leave without telling me," Fatu insisted one afternoon. "We were like sisters, and her father's grave, she visited it every week. She wouldn't abandon it." "Girls keep secrets, even from their closest friends," Mama Kessie replied smoothly. "Perhaps she met a traitor at the market, made promises she couldn't share. You know how these young girls can be, heads full of romantic foolishness." From the pen, Amina watched this exchange, bleeding desperately, trying to catch Fatu's attention. But her friend only glanced at the animals briefly before leaving, shoulders slumped in defeat. The worst times came during market days. Mama Kessie would parade her livestock through the village, and people would comment on the healthy-looking sheep. "This one would make a fine feast for the harvest festival," old Baba Seku said one day, running his weathered hands through Amina's wool. "How much do you want for her?" Amina's heart nearly stopped. The harvest festival was only 2 weeks away, if she was sold for slaughter. "Oh, I'm quite attached to this one," Mama Kessie said, though her eyes glinted with consideration. "But perhaps if the price is right." That night, Amina lay awake in terror, her animal body trembling. She had to find a way to communicate, to make someone understand. She tried writing in the dirt with her hoof, but the marks were meaningless scratches. She attempted to arrange sticks into letters, but the other animals scattered them in their movements. One evening, Mama Kessie's younger son, 8-year-old Kofi, snuck out to the pen. He had always been fond of Amina before his mother forbade their interaction. He sat beside her, his small hand gentle on her wool. "The sheep that cries," he whispered. "Mama says animals don't cry, but you do. Why do you cry, sheep?" Amina's heart leaped. She bleated softly, trying to nod her head to make him understand. But Kofi just patted her sadly and left, confused by the strange animal that seemed almost human in its sorrow. As the days passed, Amina felt her human memories beginning to fade at the edges, like a photograph left in the sun. Sometimes she caught herself thinking sheep thoughts about grass and shade and water. The realization terrified her more than anything else. Was she losing herself? Would she eventually forget she had ever been human at all? But every night, when the village slept and the stars watched silently, Amina would weep human tears and cling desperately to her memories. Her father's laugh, her mother's lullabies, the feeling of running barefoot through the morning grass as a child. She held onto her name like a lifeline in a storm. I am Amina, she would think fiercely. I am human, I am Amina. 3 months had passed since Amina's disappearance when something unexpected happened. Fadu's grandmother, old Mama Janeba, arrived from the neighboring village for a visit. She was known throughout the region as a woman with the sight, someone who could see beyond the veil of the ordinary world. The moment she entered Mama Kessie's compound to pay her respects, she stopped abruptly, her milky eyes turning toward the animal pen. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice carrying despite its softness. Mama Kessie's face went pale. I don't know what you mean, Mama Janeba. Would you like some water? The journey must have been." "Silence!" The old woman's voice cracked like a whip. She moved toward the pen with surprising speed for her age, her walking stick tapping urgently against the ground. The animals scattered, all except the white sheep, who stood frozen, staring at her with desperate, pleading eyes. Mama Janeba reached out a gnarled hand and touched Amina's head. She gasped, jerking back as if burned. "Child of sorrow, child of tears," she murmured. "What darkness has touched you?" Fadu, who had been watching from the doorway, ran to her grandmother's side. "Nana, what is it? What's wrong?" The old woman's eyes never left the sheep. "Bring me water in a white bowl, child, quickly now, and salt, pure sea salt if you have it." Mama Kessie tried to intervene. "Really, Mama, this is just a sheep. You're frightening the children with this." "Just a sheep." Mama Janeba turned her clouded eyes toward Mama Kessie, and despite their blindness, they seemed to see straight through her. "A sheep with a human soul, a sheep that weeps the tears of the betrayed. You think darkness has no price, woman. You think the ancestors sleep while you practice your abominations." Fadu returned with the water and salt. Her grandmother mixed them carefully, whispering words in the old language. She sprinkled the mixture over Amina, who felt a tingling sensation, like lightning dancing on her wool. "I cannot break what has been woven with such malice," Mama Janeba said sadly. "The spell is strong, fed by innocent blood and terrible betrayal. But," she turned to Fadu, "there is a way. The one who loves her most must recognize her truly, must call her by name with absolute certainty. Only then can the chains be broken." Fadu's eyes widened. She looked at the sheep, really looked. The eyes that stared back at her were filled with such human anguish, such desperate hope. And suddenly, like sun breaking through storm clouds, she saw. "Amina," she breathed. "Oh, merciful ancestors, Amina." The sheep Amina bleated frantically, nodding her head vigorously, tears streaming down her face. Fadu fell to her knees, embracing her transformed friend, her own tears falling like rain. "I knew you wouldn't leave," Fadu sobbed. "I knew it. Oh, Amina, what has she done to you?" Mama Kessie tried to run, but Mama Janeba's voice stopped her cold. "Move one step, and I will ensure the curse rebounds upon you threefold. The ancestors are watching, woman. Your judgment comes." The old woman turned to Fadu. "We need the whole village to witness this. Go, child, ring the meeting bell. Tell them Mama Janeba calls for emergency council. Tell them we have a witch among us." As Fadu ran to alert the village, Amina felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. It flickered in her chest like a small flame, fragile but growing stronger. She was still trapped in this animal body, but she was no longer alone. Someone knew, someone believed. Mama Kessie stood frozen, her face cycling through fear, rage, and calculation. The gourd she always carried at her waist seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "You don't know what you're interfering with, old woman," she hissed. "Powers beyond your understanding." "Child," Mama Janeba interrupted calmly, "I was walking between worlds before your mother was born. I have seen the face of darkness and spit in its eye. Your borrowed power impresses me as much as a child's tantrum. Now sit. Your trial begins when the village gathers." The meeting bell rang out across Makoko village, its bronze voice calling everyone to the central square. Such summons were rare, reserved for matters of grave importance. Men left their fields, women abandoned their cooking fires, and children were hushed and brought along. Within an hour, the entire village had assembled. Mama Janeba stood in the center, the transformed Amina beside her, while Fadu kept a protective hand on her friend's woolly neck. Mama Kessie sat on a stool, surrounded by the village elders, her face a mask of defiance even as sweat beaded on her forehead. "People of Makoko," Mama Janeba began, her voice carrying to every corner of the square. "We gather here to witness justice delayed but not denied. You all know of young Amina, daughter of the late Quame, who disappeared 3 months ago." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many nodded, remembering the kind girl who had vanished so suddenly. "She never left," the old woman continued. "She has been here all along, crying out for help, but her voice was stolen, her body changed, her humanity hidden beneath a curse most foul." She gestured to the sheep beside her. "This is Amina." The crowd erupted in shocked voices. Some laughed nervously, thinking it a joke. Others, seeing the deadly seriousness on Mama Janeba's face, fell silent. "Prove it," Mama Kessie suddenly shouted. "This old woman comes here with wild tales and expects us to believe that a sheep is a person. She's lost her mind." Mama Janeba smiled grimly. "Very well, let us prove it." She turned to the crowd. "Who among you remembers something unique about Amina, something only she would know?" An elderly woman stepped forward. "Amina helped me carry water every Tuesday. She would always hum her mother's lullaby, the one about the bird that flew to the moon. I haven't heard anyone else sing it since her mother passed." All eyes turned to the sheep. Amina's heart raced. She tried desperately to hum, to sing, but only bleats emerged. Then, in desperation, she began to tap her hoof against the ground, tap, 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 the rhythm of her mother's lullaby. The elderly woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's it. That's the rhythm exactly." More people came forward with tests. The village teacher asked the sheep to solve a simple math problem by tapping the answer. Amina did so correctly. A child asked her to identify which of several objects had belonged to her father. She went straight to his walking stick without hesitation. But it was young Kofi, Mama Kessie's own son, who provided the most damning evidence. Breaking free from his brother's grasp, he ran forward. "I saw Mama that night," he cried out. "The night Amina disappeared. I saw her with the magic gourd, the one she hides under her bed. She was putting something in it, something that looked like hair, Amina's hair." The crowd turned to Mama Kessie, whose face had gone ashen. The gourd at her waist began to crack, dark smoke seeping from the fissures. "The spell weakens," Mama Janeba announced. "Truth has been spoken by the innocent. Love has recognized what was hidden. Now let the curse be broken by the one who cast it, or let it consume her instead." Mama Kessie tried to run, but the smoke from the gourd wrapped around her like chains. She fell to her knees, screaming as the dark magic she had wielded turned against her. "Release her," Mama Janeba commanded. "Speak the words of unbinding or face the ancestors' wrath." With trembling hands, Mama Kessie pulled out the cracked gourd. She spoke words in the ancient tongue, her voice growing weaker with each syllable. The gourd shattered completely, and a brilliant light erupted from within. Amina felt the change beginning. This time there was no pain, only a sensation like diving into cool water after a long, hot day. Her wool fell away like dust, her hooves split back into fingers and toes, her face returned to its human shape. Within moments, she stood before the village, herself again, wearing the same clothes from that terrible night. "Amina!" Fadu caught her as she swayed, weak from the transformation. The crowd erupted in joy and amazement, many weeping at the miracle they had witnessed. But the celebration was short-lived as all eyes turned back to Mama Kessie. The dark magic, with nowhere else to go, had marked her. Her hair had turned white as bone, her hands twisted like claws, and when she opened her mouth to speak, only the bleating of a sheep emerged. "The curse returns to its maker," Mama Janeba said solemnly. "But because you released her willingly, if reluctantly, you will not remain transformed. Your voice will return after one full moon, time enough to contemplate your crimes. The village council will decide your fate after that." As the elders led the silenced Mama Kessie away, Amina stood on shaking legs, surrounded by friends and neighbors who embraced her with tears of joy. She looked up at the sky, where the sun broke through the clouds, and spoke her first words in 3 months. "I am Amina. I am human. I am free." 1 year later, Amina stood before the village children, telling her story. Mama Kessie had been banished after her voice returned, forbidden from practicing her dark arts ever again. Her sons chose to stay in the village, raised by kind neighbors who taught them the right path. "What did you learn, Auntie Amina?" a small girl asked, eyes wide with wonder. Amina smiled, her hand unconsciously touching the small white streak in her hair, the only remaining sign of her ordeal. "I learned that evil may hide in the shadows, wearing the face of family, speaking with honeyed words. But I also learned that truth is like water. It always finds a way. No matter how deep the darkness, how powerful the evil, love and truth will always bring light." She looked at each young face, seeing in them the future of their village. Remember this, children. When you see someone suffering, look closer. When someone disappears, ask questions. When your heart tells you something is wrong, listen. Because sometimes the sheep crying in the pen might be a person calling for help. Fatu, now training under her grandmother to become a healer, joined them. "And remember too," she added, "that one voice speaking truth can shatter the strongest spell. One friend who refuses to give up can save a life." As the children dispersed, chattering excitedly about the story, Amina and Fatu walked toward the baobab tree where they had played as children. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Do you ever have nightmares?" Fatu asked gently. "Sometimes," Amina admitted. "But then I remember that I survived, that good people stood up for me, that my father was right, truth did find its way to light, just as water finds its way to the river." They stood in comfortable silence, two friends whose bond had been tested by unimaginable darkness and emerged stronger. In the distance, the village prepared for the evening meal, smoke rising from cooking fires, children's laughter floating on the breeze. Evil had lived among them, wearing a familiar face, wielding terrible power. But in the end, it was no match for the simple, extraordinary courage of those who chose to see, to speak, and to act. If you've enjoyed this tale of courage and truth from the heart of Africa, please like this story and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to hear more incredible African folktales that remind us that no matter how long evil hides, truth will always come to light. And remember, sometimes the most powerful magic isn't in curses or spells, but in the simple act of refusing to look away when someone needs help. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your hearts brave.